Welcome to the Higher Ed Jobs podcast. I'm Andy Hibble, the Chief Operating Officer and one of the co-founders of Higher Ed Jobs.
And I'm Kelly Sherwin, the Director of Editorial Strategy. Today, we're joined by a member of our own editorial team, Leah Jackson. Leah Jackson is the Assistant Director of Editorial Strategy and a writer at HigherEdJobs, where she focuses on career development, workplace issues, and professional transition in higher ed. In her role, she helps shape editorial direction and produces advice-driven content designed to support higher ed professionals at every career stage. Her writing frequently explores how professionals can navigate change thoughtfully, build confidence in new roles, and develop sustainable approaches to career growth in higher ed. Leah, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Today, we're going to be talking about actually a couple articles that you wrote for us, Leah, on preparing for the new job and building momentum once you start that new role. So the articles are 4 ways to prepare for your new job. The other article is starting a new job. Consider these strategies for success. So, Leah, let's start out with why you thought it was important to write these articles.
Absolutely. So I think this article idea, and I don't know that I can take full credit. It may have been out of an editorial conversation that we had. But I think really where these articles came from was wanting to give the same weight to starting a new job as we do to finding a job. We spend so much time and effort and energy. We pour so much into the job search, whether it's preparing your resume, your application materials, you're preparing and practicing for an interview, thinking about writing thank you notes, all of those things that go into the job search that take so much time and effort and energy. And I think there's this tendency to like breathe a sigh of relief when you finally land a job, which is totally warranted and it's absolutely something to celebrate. But I never want people to think, okay, I can just quit now. You know, like it's almost when you're starting a new job, it's almost like starting a new race. There's other things you have to do to prepare to really thrive in a role. And so I think there's a time to celebrate when you've landed the job. And then it's almost like getting that second win to start again to really set yourself up for success. And I wanted people to be able to think about how they can give that the same attention as the job search, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. I think the interesting part is you were offering that answer, it kind of came to me. We spend all this time in the job search trying to tell the story of what we've done and why we should be hired. And it's all about the experience you have working. And now that you start the job, really what you're starting to do is this is the part that's adding to your professional career. This is what's going to help you get your next job or a promotion or whatever that might be. So I like the idea of trying to be as thoughtful about that as you just were with your job search and kind of carrying that momentum forward. In the article, you focus on some steps people can take leading up to that start date. Why do you think that preparation phase is so important?
In terms of how I broke up, I think this will be helpful for answering that question, is just talking about sort of how I broke up the articles. And I think there's kind of two phases to the preparation phase, if you will. I think there's thinking of the things that you can do leading up to actually stepping foot on campus and starting the role, because there's a lot that you can do before you actually get there. And when you read the articles, you'll see things such as, preparing your list of questions for HR, familiarizing yourself again with the campus, what resources are available, especially in today's age. I think knowing what's available on campus, every person serves a role in student success and just being able to refer students around campus. And so I think knowing what's available, knowing what's on campus, who you might refer to, what the tools are that they're using, those are the sort of things that you can be doing in advance of starting, reviewing the mission and goals of the institution. And even as silly as it might sound, things like planning out your morning and your commute to campus, because I am one of those people that is always late, no matter what. It just never seems to fail. So I think just thinking about those things, it might help you start off strong and really make a good first impression. Those are things that you can do before you get there. And then the second article was really more about the strategy for long-term success. and what you can do once you're already on the job.
Leah, thank you for helping us, kind of, set the stage on how you broke up these articles, because I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, once you get that job offer and you're excited about this starting this new role, you have to do like a different type of preparation than you do in the job search. Obviously, you're preparing for the interview and you're preparing your materials, but now that you have the position, like I said, you're preparing in a different way. Like you said, you're asking questions for, or you're developing questions for HR. So make sure you have those questions ready, and you're researching, reminding yourself, I guess, again about the mission of the institution. And no, it doesn't sound silly at all to remind yourself that this is what the commute's going to be like, and kind of plan, like make sure there's a contingency plan. Like, what if there's traffic? Make sure you get there early, because I'm the type of person that if the more I can prepare in advance, the less anxiety I will have going in. So if you can have that preparation, weeks or even like a couple of days before leading up to it, do a trial run. And if you take the train, take jump on the train and see how long it takes. If you take, if you drive, walk, whatever, run through those. So you are set, like you said, setting yourself up for success when you start on, day one from that job. And then, like you said, in your second, article, it takes over from what to do once you're on that job.
I think this is about setting expectations. And I think there's a couple of schools of thought here that, well, the employer should tell you what they expect. But at the end of the day, it's your best interest to meet expectations. And showing initiative and finding out what those expectations are actually is a good way to demonstrate your competency. So looking at that and saying, oh my gosh, I don't know, on Zoom, should I have a background that's consistent with the branding of the university? What about my dog in Zoom if I'm on Zoom? I mean, even if you work fully on site, you're going to be on Zoom. Knowing the etiquette there is extremely important. I always think attire is extremely difficult. And I think having expectations of just knowing what's expected of me for where I present myself. If you're working in a position, maybe when customers or clients are in the office, there's a different attire expectation than if there's nobody going to be in the office that day. And I think just having a sense of those little things, put the burden on yourself too. Don't wait for the employer to tell you this is what the expectation is. Do I think they should? I think good employers do, but also take the initiative here and show that. It will actually help moving towards your second article, set that sort of best first tone that you're really looking for. This seems like the natural place to have the transition to how actually being on the job and talking a little bit about some strategies for success. The second article, there was a part in it that just struck me. It was from Eric Ng, who said, "Don't wait for others to reach out to you. Take initiative and introduce yourself to your colleagues. Building positive relationships with your coworkers from day one is vital for creating a supportive and collaborative work environment." And it reminded me of a great example I can share of what I did, which is an example of what you should not do. When I started my position in 1995 at Penn State, I know that seems like years ago, as it was 3 decades. I went to go have lunch by myself at a local place near where the office was. And I sat down with an actual newspaper back in the day and proceeded to eat my lunch and read the newspaper and get a break from my work. And I didn't realize it, but there were 3 colleagues of mine sitting a few tables over, and one of them came over and said, "Hey, would you like to come over and eat with us?" He saw me eating by myself. And I said, "No, I think I'm good." And I didn't have lunch with them. Do not do that. Go sit with your colleagues. Because I warn you, and this is a cautionary tale, that person was my co-founder, John Eikenberry. And the first thing I ever said to him, now after working with him for 30 years, is, "No, I don't want to have lunch with you." And I get reminded of that quite frequently. So I really think about that story. Think about, you have that first chance over the first few days, week or two, to make that initial impression. But then you have about 3 months to kind of establish what people really see, the more complete picture of you, and just make sure you're doing that. I think talking about being proactive in your relationships, other than not doing what I did, what advice do you have for someone who might feel a little hesitant about reaching out or introducing themselves in those first couple of weeks?
I hate to throw another article in the mix since we're already talking about 2 articles, but I can't help myself because we have a really, really great article from one of our regular contributors, Justin Zackal, that's called How to Introduce Yourself. We can definitely link it in the podcast description here so you can find it. But one of the things that stuck out to me in that article that I remember after all this time is he talks about how it really shouldn't be about you when you introduce yourself. It should be about the audience that you're introducing yourself to. And I think for me, that helps take a little bit of pressure off. It's really it's less about giving a spiel about you and everything you've done in your whole life. And it's really more about being curious about how you can help them, how you can be supportive of their work, how you can collaborate with them or be an ally. And so I think remembering that, checking out that article, the other great tips that he has in there would be one of the first places that I would start. But I think it really goes back to the idea of being curious and, getting to know people and really wanting to learn about them and kind of where you fit into things, and focusing more on that than getting stressed out about saying exactly the right thing to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that idea up and that article. And Andy, thank you for sharing that story. I wasn't sure exactly where you're going with it. I was hoping you said I kind of regret not having lunch, because I think that's like, even though sometimes it's pushing us out of our comfort zone. Of course, it's a little intimidating sometimes meeting new people. But if someone comes up to you, or sometimes you might have to go out of your comfort zone and say, hi, can I sit here? Or push yourself and join a committee if you can, and force yourself to meet people. And like you said, Leah, learn their story, learn what their role is, why they're there, and then them learning about you will come natural. Were you going to say something else, Andy? Sorry. Okay. So Leah, I want to kind of keep going on. You said being curious, and I want to kind of go back to that. In the article, you stress the importance of kind of approaching your role with curiosity and being flexible. Can you expand a little more on that and why you think that's important? Someone takes that mindset coming into the new role.
Absolutely. I think, when you're starting a new role, I think there is real value in being curious, being flexible. I think we all come with our set ways of working, things that have worked for us. We kind of can be set in our ways. I think when you're joining a new team, it's really important to learn how they've worked, like what their typical workflow is, observe and be adaptable, be willing to try the systems that they're already using, because they've already kind of established that. And that isn't to say that you can't make suggestions. You're obviously there for a reason, and you will add value once you have built your credibility. And so I think it's just leaning into what they are already doing and kind of giving that a real shot before you try to make change. It is kind of how I look at it.
I love the idea because I don't think anyone wants to hear from a person's like, well, this is how we used to do it at our old place. I mean, I've been in situations before that people were like, well, this is how we used to do it, or this is how, at my old job, I used to do it like this. Or, if you like, you're saying, Leah, how you're stressed, like just like take some time to get to kind of know the lay of the land and be curious and open-minded, not judgmental, because you might be learning something from them by learning their process. And again, like you said, maybe you can offer suggestions, but you kind of have to like know when that is. Like if it's day one, I don't know if I would go out of the gate saying, this is wrong, you guys, you should be doing this. But if you're there for a couple weeks, a couple months, gauge when it might be appropriate to say, hey, I was curious about this. Maybe, have we thought about doing it this way? So I love the idea of coming in open-minded, not being judgmental, being curious to learn, why things are done certain ways, and then going from there.
A couple weeks is early. For
True.
me.
Yeah.
I
Maybe a lunch. You can suggest a lunch place, but nothing like nothing big.
Touche. But what I do think here, first of all, when you feel like and you hear, well, this is the way we've always done it, ask why before offering any sort of suggestion. Try to understand why it's been done this way. And if the answer is simply, well, we've done it this way just because we've done it this way, that's when you can start asking more probing questions. Do you see ways it can be improved? What do you think works well with it? Like, get them engaged as to providing some thought behind why it is in that way. I think for me, it kind of begs the question of the word we. When you start a new position, the we is your new colleagues. They aren't a they. They are a we. The we that you may be referring to in your old colleagues are, in my last position, my colleagues did. You are not part of that we anymore. Be very cognizant of it. You want to be part of the group. You are part of the group. And to separate yourself out as if you're part of some other group and that group knows better than the group that you're currently in, it's a lot better of a suggestion after hearing something that they've done and you have a suggestion to say, well, I actually think what would help us here is if we focus on those priorities that we don't seem to be meeting that you talked about, priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, and maybe we could better accomplish those by doing these things a little bit differently. That's what they want to hear. I wouldn't even cite that you did it differently at your old position. People don't want to hear that. They want to hear you part of the team.
True.
Which is one of these, this kind of goes into another part of the article for me, is learning how to learn and make mistakes. You're going to slip on the we, please. Everybody does. Don't beat yourself up. But how can new hires balance wanting to make a strong impression with being realistic about the learning curve?
I think for me, that really comes down to how you talk to yourself, offering yourself self-compassion, or offering yourself compassion, I guess I should say. Not harshly judging yourself, recognizing, like you said, Andy, that you are going to make mistakes. I think it's about how you handle those mistakes once you've made them. It's about learning what went wrong and working to improve for the future. And it's not expecting perfection, but making an effort to correct it and make progress going forward.
Leah, I agree with all that, being okay to make mistakes, and like you said in your article, fail forward. But another thing I want to bring up is oftentimes I think people have this imposter syndrome or imposter feelings, and we're plugging articles and past podcasts, but RJ Jenkins did a great podcast on imposter feelings. But get out of your mind and be okay with knowing you were hired for a reason. Like, you went through this search. They chose you for a reason. So it's okay if you don't know everything, and it's okay if you make a mistake, but believe in yourself that you're there at that institution, in that role for a particular reason.
I should probably be clear now as a disclaimer to those of you who are listening. We do not get paid by the number of articles that we name drop in a podcast.
Kelly, I love what you said, though. I feel like that boils down to you deserve to be there. You should feel good about that.
And don't expect perfection. No one's perfect. They didn't hire you because they're perfect. They want. As I look over to our producer, Mike's like, wait, what? You are perfect. Yes.
Thank you.
So as we wrap up the discussion about starting the job and preparing for success, let's boil it down to, if you guys had to give one tip, someone is about to start the new job, or maybe they're just a few weeks in, what's that one thing you'd want to have them keep in mind?
I think for me, if I had to pick kind of one thing from these articles, and I because I think it's listed as a bullet point in here, but I think it applies across the board, is the curiosity and the flexibility. I think that is the right mindset to approach a new job with. I think Andy touched on this with asking why. You want to go in, you want to learn why things are done the way that they are, what impact you can make, where you can help. I think going into it with this curiosity, flexibility, willingness to learn is going to set you up for the best success.
I would second that. I think that that is absolutely the spirit by which you need to go into the position. I'd also really, really pay attention to feedback. If you're getting feedback, it's a gift. Do not see it as anything but that. Even if it's negative, even if it's kind of harshly delivered, you're getting real feedback. That means you're engaging your coworkers in what you're doing. Take it seriously. Don't get defensive with it. Listen to it and respond to it. But if you aren't getting feedback, which is sometimes the scariest of all scary things, understand why you're not getting feedback. How much are you really engaging with your colleagues? How much are you being curious? I would posit if you're curious, you're going to get feedback. If you're not being curious, you're not going to get feedback. Curiosity usually creates more curiosity. If you're getting that from your colleagues, that's what you're striving for, and listen to it. If I would put one exception to that rule, if you're not hearing any feedback, and sometimes that's more reflective of the culture. There may be a reason why you have no feedback is because the culture really does not promote people being curious and being open. If you're starting to see that, I would try to keep your eyes open. That might be a situation you need to deal with and better understand. What I would say is with time and trust, eventually you're going to hear that from some of your colleagues. Once again, pay attention to it.
So I will say I'm kind of cheating here because I have two pieces of information, but one is based off what you guys just both were talking about and being curious and getting feedback. I want to encourage people to, if you're not getting the feedback, don't just wait for them to express their feedback. I think in the beginning stages, definitely in that first, maybe it's not necessarily that first day, but in that early first week or two, clarify the expectations with your supervisor. What do they expect out of you in the first 30 days, the first 60, 90, a year? But then also set up a check-in, maybe at a whatever mark you want to make, 90 days. So everyone is on the same page, because if you think you were hired to do something and they thought they were hiring you to do something, and you just go on your way and then 90 days goes by and it wasn't aligning, that's rough. So I would encourage people to kind of start early, again, being curious, ask those questions. So, because then that can set the expectations and encourage feedback. So that's my little comment on what you guys were saying. But my other piece of advice is actually piggyback on kind of the ideas of what Justin was talking about, introducing yourself, and Leah, what you were saying before, is when you are introducing yourself, try, and I am far from perfect on this, but try to remember someone's name. So when you see them again on campus, or you see them in the cafeteria or the common space, you can give them a little smile and say, "Hi, Andy. It's nice to see you." Because I'm kind of going back to that Maya Angelou quote. People remember. Now I'm confusing in my head. People remember how you make. What is that? You remember how they make you feel. Is that the? Now this is not turning out how I wanted in my head. I should have had the Maya Angelou quote. Lee, are you looking it up for me?
I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
Introduce yourself and say, "Hi, Andy. It's nice to see you again." Because if you give them that warm smile, people will remember that. They will remember how you made them feel.
I absolutely agree, but I feel like we just lost half of our audience there, like me, who can't for the life of them remember people's names.
I get that, but then there's a tip for that. Then just don't wait for a whole 6 or 9 months to go by, and then it's really awkward. Just be like, "I am so sorry, I can't remember. Can you remind me your name again?" There's nothing wrong with that.
And I would tack on to that: do not intentionally become a serial reintroducer at that point, expecting them then to say their name again. Say, "I know we've met. I'm really sorry. I met a lot of people at once. Can you just share your name with me again?" And I will tell you, after the second time, you need to remember the name.
True. Yeah.
The third strike, you're out. Remember.
Well, Leah, it was fun having you join us today. Thank you so much for jumping on the podcast with us. We enjoyed this conversation, and we hopefully And we hope that our listeners find it useful when they're starting their new role.
Absolutely. It was great talking with both of you about this.
Thanks, Leah, and thank you for listening. We'll make sure to link both of Leah's articles to the podcast notes, and also Justin's article about how to introduce yourself and RJ's article about imposter feelings or the imposter syndrome. If you have any questions or thoughts you'd like to share from today's podcast, like your own tips or your own thoughts on starting a job, please email us at podcast@higheredjobs.com or send us a direct message on X at HigherEdCareers. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to talking with you again real soon.